B'yeshiva shalmala uv'yeshiva shalmata, by the authority of the court on high and by the authority of the court below, with divine consent and with the consent of this holy congregation, we grant permission to pray with those who have transgressed. In our tradition, beginning with our biblical heroes, we live our lives incompletely. Our aspirations often are beyond the reach of our achievement, particularly in the realm of our words. And so we begin Kol Nidre, the prayer in which we acknowledge that our words may not all come to fruition, with the recognition of our fallibility and more, God's ability to accept us as only human and more, our ability to aspire to be more in this coming year.
V'shiva shel mala u'v'shiva shel mata, al da'at ha'makom ve'al da'at ha'kahal, anu matarin ha'tlapalel im ha'abaronim.
בשבועה של מעלה ובשבועה של מטל על דעת המקום
ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים.
בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל אנו מתירים להתפלל עם העבריינים.
Kol Nidre ve'esarei b'charamei ve'konamei ve'chinuyei ve'chinusei u'shavuot din darna u'dishtabana u'de'acharimna v'dasana al nafshatana miyom kippurim zeh ad yom kippurim ויחרתנה בהון כל הון יהון שלם שביתי בטלין ומבוטלים לשרירין ולא קיימין נדרנה ואסרנה לאסרי ושבועתנה לשבועות
Kol Nidre ve'esarei ve'charamei ve'konamei ve'chinoyei ve'kinosei u'shavuot Din darna uleishtabana uleacharimna ve'asarna nashatana miom kippurim ze ad yom kippurim haba aleinu letova kulhon icharatna ve'hon kulhon yehon sharan shvikin shevitin betelin umevutalim לשרירין ולקיימין נדרנה לנדרה וסרנה לאסרי ושבותנה לשבות
Kol ואסרי וחרמי וקונמי וכינויי וכינוסי ושבות ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה סלח נא לעוון העם הזה כי גודל חסדך וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני סלחתי Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh.
With the conclusion of Kol Nidre, the Torahs are put back in the ark, and we remain in our talitot. We started with our prayer shawls for in appearing before our peers as our court. We do so before the beginning of sacred time. Kol Nidre is an introduction to Yom Kippur, a day in which we ask God for forgiveness of our many shortcomings. And so, in this moment, we link ourselves to each other as our prayers are in the plural. And although we are not in the same room, we are in the same sacred space. Let us pray together, knowing that we do so as a sacred community. Page 207, the call to prayer.
Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, 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 nai. Yai, nai, ya, na, 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 nai. Yai, nai, nai, ya, na, 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 nai. Yai, nai, nai, ya, na, 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 nai. Ya, na, nai, yai, nai. Baruchu Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Umavir yom, umevir laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila. Adonai tzavaot shemo, El Chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu, leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ari v'aravim. Ahavat olam, Beit Yisrael, Amecha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Alekein Adonai Eloheinu b'shokveinu u'b'kumenu nasiach b'chukecha v'nitzmach b'divrei Toratecha u'b'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nehege yomam v'layla, ve'ahavatecha, al tazir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema.
Shema. Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod, Shem Kavod, Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meotecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher Elohim mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivshecha b'beitecha ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. שמות ישמעו מצוותיי, שנכין שפתכם היום, ולא בכל חום נפשכם וידעתם תעשיכם, וכל שלב הכנעים יצריכם להתייס על כל תוספת, שלפן יתן חזרתם, תיתן את זה ולא בזה ולזבה שלא יתנכם, שם דבר לכם ועולם שלכם וקשרתם אותם ולכם ולכם ובאו שלכם ודרך שלכם, סבא שלום עליהם Larish Marvin is on seat seat. I could fit the game and know them and know what's it sick and over the head and come and sit seat. I tell those sort them comes or say the two of them and this girl say it him. There is such a the all the hem and the Adonai Elohim Emet.
Adonai Elohim Emet. אמונה כל זאת, וקיים עלינו כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואין זאת. תנו מי אנחנו. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נובע תהילות אוסף מלכותך רבנך בוקע יום לפני משה זה עלינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום.
Allow us, Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully and to waken again to life, our sovereign. Spread over us your canopy of peace, restore us with your good counsel, and save us for the sake of your name. Shield us, remove from us enemies and pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow, and remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings. For you, God, watch over and deliver us. And you are the sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Ensure our going and coming for life and peace, now and forever. May you spread over us your canopy of peace.
Baruch Ata Adonai, Haporei Sukat Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Ki vayom hazeh yechaper alechem, letaher etechem, mikochatotechem, lifnei Adonai titalu.
Page 212, Chatzi Kaddish, the mini Kaddish, is followed by the elongated Amidah, the standing prayer, which will be said silently, pages 213 to 221. That private Amidah will include at the end the long list of al-chetz, our 44 confessionals done in the plural. Consider this as an opportunity to reflect on one of those al-chetz and how it applies to you. Chatzi Kaddish, and then the Amidah 213 to 221.
Yitkadam v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah ve'alemadi v'rakirutei B'amlich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yomechon U'v'chayedecho beit Yisrael B'agala v'zman kariv v'miru amen Yehi Shemei Rabbah v'varach Le'alam u'lalamei halaya Yitbarach Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar v'yitromam v'yitnasei V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha b'richu Le'ela le'ela Mikol bichata v'shivata Tushbechato v'nechamata Da'amiran be'alema ve'imeru Amen.
Kol Nidre focuses our attention on the power of words and our fallibility in using them. In our tradition, the world was created with words, and we have the potential to destroy as well. In the Talmud, tractate Baba Metzia, which deals with civil wrongs, there's an emphasis on the power and danger of words. The Mishnah begins as follows: Kishem she'ona'a b'mekach u'mimkar, just as there is fraud or wrongdoing in buying and selling, kach ona'a bidvarim, so there is wrongdoing with words. And then this writing of the early centuries of the Common Era describes examples. If a person walks into a store and asks for the price of an item but has no intention of buying, so the rabbis say that is ona'ah devarim. That is hurtful speech, for you've created an expectation that is knowingly false. And likewise, if somebody is a Baal Tshuva, somebody who has done repentance, and they are reminded of their past misdeeds, that, the Mishnah says, is ona'ah devarim, the fraudulent, the hurtful use of words. The Gemara, the continuation of these rabbinic conversation, takes place in Baghdad from about the 2nd to the 6th century. And here the rabbis continue to discuss the power of words. A pair of rabbis say that if you intentionally embarrass another person and their face turns red, that's just like you shed their blood. And another rabbi says, you know, we learn in Psalm 39:13, Ha'azina el dim'ati al techarash. Listen to my tears, you cannot be deaf. And the rabbi says that phrase from Psalm 39 emphasizes that when a person is injured by hurtful words so as to shed tears, God listens and responds. In fact, continues to say that when all the gates of prayer are closed, when there are tears of hurt for hurtful words, God even then will respond. Which leads, after this discussion on the power and hurt of words, to the following story. And I've looked forward, particularly on this Kol Nidre evening, to having this opportunity to share a long story. So get comfortable, but it's a story of great importance for our tradition. The rabbis, just after the destruction of the temple, left Jerusalem and gathered in a place called Yavne, close to what is today Rehovot. And there they discussed Jewish law in order to create a consensus of how the people could continue to live in relationship with God. And one of their foci was the rituals of the temple, even though the temple no longer stood, to study the rules of purity and impurity, which were required for a person to ritually come to the temple, continued to be a subject of debate. In this case, the rabbis were discussing something new, an oven called Tanur Da'achnai, the oven of coils. For this new invention was taking sand and placing it between the coils of the clay to increase the heat of the oven. And the debate was, if an animal gets caught, a lizard, in an oven, that leads to impurity. Death is impurity. Could, in this Tanur Da'achnai, that impurity get transferred to vessels on the oven or not? And in this debate, we're not told the details, but we are told that they reach an impasse. It's all the rabbis on one side and Rabbi Eliezer on the other. A little bit about Eliezer, whose name means God is my help. Rabbi Eliezer was born to a priestly family, but apparently a family not engaged in the priesthood, but in business, and of some wealth. Rabbi Eliezer decided to join the Academy of Study, to his father's disappointment, until his father one day came and heard him teach and was so impressed, both by his skill in conveying the teachings of the tradition, but more the respect that all his peers showed him. Apparently, Rabbi Eliezer had an uncanny memory and an ability to be persuasive, added to with an aristocratic bearing. He was used to being right. So there's all the rabbis saying this oven creates impurity, and Rabbi Eliezer by himself. They're apparently sitting outside, and Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, despite all your arguments, that carob tree will prove it. And in a flash, the carob tree shoots into the air. Some say 100 amot, about 70 feet. Others say 400 amot. And the rabbis respond, carob trees don't prove law. Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, you see that aqueduct? Watch the water. Sure enough, the water stops and reverses course. And here too, the rabbis say, aqueducts, they don't prove law. Now, Rabbi Eliezer is really getting vexed. Right behind him is a wall, and Rabbi Eliezer says, if I am right, this wall will prove it. And the wall begins to totter when Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Joshua, stands up and says, stop. And the Talmud records that the wall stopped at an incline, not wanting to offend either Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Joshua. And Rabbi Joshua then addresses the wall. Don't interfere in our scholarly debate. Rabbi Joshua, he grew up apparently with Rabbi Eliezer, but a very different presence and a different background. Rabbi Joshua didn't have the family money behind him. He supported himself as a tailor and more. Elsewhere in the Talmud, it's recorded that Rabbi Joshua fell in love with a beautiful young woman and offered and asked to marry her. When she saw how physically unattractive he was, she declined. And remarkably, for those days, he never married. But as a member of the Sanhedrin, a member of the court, he was admired. And back to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer now has demonstrated power with the carob tree, with the water, with the wall, and now he's really worked up, and he says, I know I'm right. And no less than a voice from the heavens will declare it to be so. And sure enough, a bat kol, an echo, a daughter voice, was heard by the rabbi saying, why do you contend with Rabbi Eliezer? The law always accords with him. And Rabbi Yehoshua stood and he said, looking up at heaven, Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Torah is not in heaven. Saying in that moment, God, don't meddle. You gave us your word. It's written. It's our responsibility now to interpret it. Acharei rabim lahatot. He continues to quote Torah. After the majority, you shall incline. And so all the rabbis maintain their position, unimpressed with the voice from heaven. And the story continues to be told in the Talmud of a Rabbi Natan who is wandering when he meets Elijah the prophet. And he says, Elijah, do you happen to know how God responded to that moment in which the rabbis of Yavne rejected the bat kol? And Elijah the prophet, who in our tradition goes back and forth between heaven and earth, said, yes, I was there. God laughed and said, Natzchuni banai, Natzchuni banai. My children are victorious. My children are victorious. Suggesting God's delight in the maturity of the Jewish sages and their accepting of a responsibility to use reason and debate to discern an interpretation that can bring the community forward. Now, apparently, Eliezer did not accept the ruling of the majority. After all, he's used to being right, and even the voice from heaven said he was right. And so the rabbis convened, deeply bothered and perhaps a little upset about that wall that almost fell on them. And they took a vote and decided to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer. To be excommunicated is to be a pariah, to be as if you're dead to the community. And the rabbis were nervous. Who's going to tell Rabbi Eliezer? Rabban Gamliel, who was the head of the court, who would normally be responsible as the leader, he had to go out to sea. Rabbi Akiva was a student of Rabbi Eliezer. He was an older student. You may know the story of how he only began to learn at the age of 40. He was more mature. He said, let me go and speak to my teacher. For if somebody goes and tells it to him in a way that doesn't take into account his feelings, such are his powers, he could destroy the entire world. And so Rabbi Akiva is appointed. He dresses all in black, and he goes to his teacher's room. And there on this day, he sits in the corner and says not a word. Rabbi Eliezer looks over at him and he says, Akiva, what's different about this day? And Akiva says, my master, it appears to me that your peers, the other judges of the court, have decided to separate from you, to excommunicate you. At this point, Rabbi Eliezer tears his garment, takes off his shoes, and sits on the floor as a mourner would, and he begins to sob. The Talmud says that in that moment, a third of the crops of olives, wheat, and barley are spoiled. And even a woman holding kneaded dough in her hands, the dough is spoiled. Such is the power of the grief of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is married to Ima Shalom, the mother of peace, who happens to be Rabban Gamliel's sister. Rabban Gamliel, you recall, he's out at sea. And at sea, the waves begin to grow and storm. It's as if the boat is going to topple. And Rabban Gamliel immediately knows why. He says it's because of Rabbi Eliezer. He must have heard. And he stands in the boat, hardly able to maintain his balance, and he says, Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, we made that decision regarding Rabbi Eliezer not for my honor, but for your honor, so that the people of Israel would be limited in their disputes and not broken by a renegade. And at that point, the Talmud records, the water still. Ima Shalom is nervous because she knows the grief of her husband and his power. She's afraid that in his torn prayer, he might express so much pain that her brother, the head of the court, Rabban Gamliel, will be killed. And so she is vigilant. When her husband prays the Amidah, the standing prayer, it's followed by Tachanun, a prayer in which you put your head in your arm and you open your heart for personal pleads. And she watches every time her husband prays that he not sit down, lest that prayer, that Tachanun, cause damage to her brother. Except one day, the Talmud records, as her husband is praying, there's a knock on the door, and Ima Shalom rushes, and there is a man standing and says, "Please, if you be so kind, could you just give me a morsel of bread?" Ima Shalom rushes to the kitchen, grabs an entire loaf, gives it to the man, and returns to her husband's prayer room. And then she sees his hand is on the table. And she shrieks, "No!" because she sees that his head is on his hand. He is saying the Tachanun. And soon thereafter, a messenger arrives, announcing that Rabban Gamliel has died. Others in the house say, "Ima Shalom, how did you know? How did you know?" And she said, "Because I was taught from an early age that line from Psalms, Ha'azina ledimati al techarash, that God listens to tears, cannot be deaf." I knew the possibility that those tears of pain could bring my brother's end. And so this story ends sadly. Rabbi Eliezer would soon die afterwards. Tonight, Kol Nidre, a night in which we gather as a Jewish people to honor our legacy of storytelling across generations. Why this story? Why is it in the Talmud? First, it's there to teach us something very important about how the rabbis understood their roles of interpreters of Torah. Richard Elliott Friedman, a Bible scholar who taught at UCSD and later in Georgia, wrote a book called The Disappearance of God, in which he tells this story. But he begins with the Garden of Eden, where God talks to Adam and Eve, where God will talk to the patriarchs and send angels to speak to the matriarchs. But by the time of Joseph, God no longer speaks directly, only gives Joseph the ability to discern God's way through dreams. And at the end of Hebrew Scripture, in the book of Esther, God's name is not even mentioned. But Professor Friedman brings this story as the next stage, in which, distinctly to Judaism, the sages say, what we have received by revelation is now ours to interpret. Revelation is no longer. My friend and teacher, Rabbi Eddie Feinstein, adds to accentuate that point, that here, if the rabbis accepted the signs and wonders of Rabbi Eliezer, then whoever could do the most impressive magic tricks would be king. For that person would have the authority to decide law. And the notion that signs and wonders, rather than reason and debate, guide a community is what allowed the Jewish people to survive across changing times and places. But there's another and a final reason I want to share that story is in our sacred text. The rabbis put it there as a cautionary tale. These are the rabbis who saw the Romans with battering rams and the 10th Legion, with those mighty forces destroy the temple. The cautionary tale is that the Romans could destroy the building, but it was ona'ad devarim, the misuse of tongue to hurt and separate and isolate, that destroys us as a community. Therefore, be on notice. You can argue. That's our tradition, to debate. Hillel and Shammai, the teachers of these rabbis, would argue and debate. But at the end, they accepted the differences and they honored and respected each other and accepted the majority opinion as the ruling to keep the people together. And so, words can destroy community. On this night of Kol Nidre, when we open with a prayer that reminds us of the power of words, we also pause, looking forward. We are in such painfully charged, divided political times. And sometimes, because this moment feels so important, who will replace Justice Ginsburg feels urgent and important, that there is a tendency to not only dismiss the other side, but to demonize it. I know in my own family there are people who voted differently than me, and it bothers me because this is a politically charged time. And yet, I am reminded how much I love them and how much more we have in common and need to listen, and I do listen and respectfully listen to how they've chosen how they vote. And so we need to listen and not excommunicate. We as Jews, we're only 0.2% of the world. We're a small people, an extended family. Here too, we are challenged with Ahavat Yisrael to love other Jews who differ from us on what are very important issues. But again, in the best tradition of Hillel and Shammai, to listen respectfully, to hold a position without dismissing or demonizing the other. If we can have Ahavat Yisrael for us as an extended family, then on the larger circle of fellow Americans, even if it's difficult at times to understand the other, we must honor that there are questions that people answer in different ways. And so as we move ahead in these times, this story of the Tanur de Achnai, the oven of Achnai, is for us a reminder that we do not want to use words like swords, turning her face red. Let us argue, let us debate, let us reason, but let us honor each other. Ribono Shalom, Master of the universe, on this holy night of Yom Kippur, we are reminded of the power of words to hurt and to create. May we know how much more we have in common than how we differ, and may we honor the dignity and goodness of even those with whom we disagree, and do so with you in our presence as our common parent. Amen.
Ya'ale tachanuneinu me'erev v'yavo shavateinu mi'boker v'yira'e v'nuneinu ad ha'arev
Grant relief to this driven leaf. Have compassion on that which is but dust and ashes. Cast away our sins. Be kind to your creations. No human being can plead for us. Have mercy on us. Slichot, the beautiful poems that we now share, are poems that acknowledge our creatureliness, our fragility, and yet our yearning to be more. Words that we chant before God, beginning page 225, leading to Shema Kolenu, listen to our voices. For even more than our words, we ask God to hear the voice, the yearning behind the words. Page 225, Haneshama Lach, our soul is yours.
Yainai, 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 אפיים אתה ובעל הרחמים נקראת, ודרך תשובה הורית, גדולת רחמך וחסדך תזכור היום, ובכל יום לזרע ידידך, תפן עלינו ברחמך, כי אתה הוא בעל הרחמים. בתחנון ובתפילה פניך נקדם, כל דעת עד לענף מקדם. מחרון אבך שוב, כמו בתורתך כתוב, ובצל כנפיך נחסה ונתלונן, כיום וירד אדוני בענן. תעבור על פשע ותמחה אשם, כיום ויתייצב עמו שם, תאזין שבתנו ותקשיב מנו מאמור, כיום ויקרא בשם אדוני. ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא. אדוני, אדוני, אל הרחום וחנון, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע וחטא ונקה. וסלחת לעווננו וחטאתנו ונחלתנו. סלח לנו אבינו, כי חטאנו, מחלנו מלכנו, כי פשענו, כי אתה אדוני, טוב וסלח, ורב חסד, לכל קוראיך. שמע קולנו, אדוני אלוהינו,
תפילתנו ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם חדש ימינו כקדם
שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו חוס ורחם עלינו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו.
שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו חוס ורחם עלינו וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו.
השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם.
השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם.
אל תשליכנו מלפניך ורוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו.
אל תשליכנו מלפניך ורוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו.
אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה ככלות כוחנו אל תעזבנו.
אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה ככלות כוחנו אל תעזבנו.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. כי אנו עמך, ואתה אלוהינו, אנו בניך, ואתה אבינו.
אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו, אנו קהלך ואתה חלקנו.
אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו, אנו צונך ואתה רוענו.
אנו חמך ואתה נוטרנו, אנו פולתך ואתה יוצרנו.
אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו, אנו סגולתך ואתה קרובנו.
אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו, אנו ממירך ואתה ממירנו.
אנו הזפנים ואתה רחום וחנון, אנו קשי עורף ואתה ערך אפיים, אנו מלאי עוון ואתה מלא רחמים. אנו ימינו כצל עובר ואתה הוא ושנותיך לא יתמו. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו שאין אנחנו עזי פנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו אבל אנחנו ואבותינו חטאנו יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 אשמנו בגדנו גזלנו דיברנו דופי יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 הבינו והרשנו זדנו חמסנו טפלנו שקר יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יעצנו רע כיזבנו לצנו מרדנו ניאצנו יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 שררנו אבינו פשענו זררנו קישינו עורף יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 רשענו שיחתנו תיעבנו טעינו תיתנו יאי נאי 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 יא נאי 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 יא נאי 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 נאי.
With the Al Chet, we will chant for the first time on this Yom Kippur publicly a list of our shortcomings. There are 44. What they have in common is that they're said in the plural, for we acknowledge this as our collective shortcomings, either with acts we've done or by responsibility for being part of a community. With each Al Chet, we will take our fist and hit our chest, and there are three possible ways to understand it. One is to wake our hearts up to feel what we are saying. The other is to hit ourselves with a sense of self-chastisement. But there's a third way, And that's to hit our hearts, to massage, to be aware that although we could be better, we still acknowledge our goodness. Page 237, Al Chet.
Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha be'ones uvradzon, ve'al Chet shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev.
The first set in English. We have sinned against you unwillingly and willingly, and we have sinned against you through hardening our hearts. We have sinned against you thoughtlessly, and we have sinned against you in idle chatter. We have sinned against you through sexual immorality, and we have sinned against you openly and in private. We have sinned against you knowingly and deceitfully, and we have sinned against you by the way we talk. We have sinned against you by defrauding others, and we have sinned against you in our innermost thoughts. We have sinned against you through forbidden trysts, and we have sinned against you through empty confession. We have sinned against you by scorning parents and teachers, and we have sinned against you purposely and by mistake. We have sinned against you by resorting to violence, and we have sinned against you by public desecration of your name. We have sinned against you through foul speech, and we have sinned against you through foolish talk. We have sinned against you through pursuing the impulse to evil, and we have sinned against you wittingly and unwittingly. For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. Shalach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu al chet shechatanu ולפניך ולרבנך ולרצון אחרי שאתם ולרצונך אחרי שחטא לפניך ושכום אבינו אחרי שחטא לפניך מנידת גרון ושחטא לפניך בשיח סבותינו אחרי שחטא לפניך בסיקור עין אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח ועל כולם אלו הסליחות סלח לנו מחל לנו כפר לנו אחרי שחטאנו אחרי אחרי שחטא לפניך בשנאת חינם, אחרי לפניך בצורת יד, אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בתימהון לבב, ועל כולם אלו הסליחות, סלח לנו מחל לנו כפר לנו. Hu Ya'anenu, God will answer us. In this next poem, we are invited to respond Hu Ya'anenu to a survey of key moments in the 5 books of Moses. Page 240, Hu Ya'anenu.
Mishana l'Sara imenu b'zignata, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Avraham Avinu b'Har HaMoriah, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Yitzchak b'nam shene'ekad al gabei hamizbeach, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Rivka b'Heryona, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Yaakov b'Vedel, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Leah b'Oniah, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Rachel b'Itzvona, Hu Ya'anenu. Mishana l'Yosef b'Beit HaAsurim, Hu Ya'anenu. צדיקות על האבניים. הוא יעלנו. מי שנה לא יוכבת על שפת היאור. הוא יעלנו. מי שנה לאבותינו ולאמותינו על ים סוף. הוא יעננו. מי שנה למשה בחורב. הוא יעננו. מי שנה למרים בבערה. הוא יעננו. מי שנה לאהרון במחתה. הוא יעננו. מי שנה לפנחס בקומו מתוך העדה. הוא יעננו. מי שנה לבנות צלוף אחד ביום דן פתח אוהל מועד. הוא יעלנו. מי שנה לכו הצדיקים והצדיקות. הוא יעלנו. והחסידים והחסידות. הוא יעלנו. והתמימים והתמימות. הוא יעלנו. והישרים והישרות. והרחמנים והרחמניות. הוא יעלנו.
all words that we use to describe God are only metaphors that allow us to identify with qualities of God. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our parent. Malkeinu, our King, our ruler, our guide. Those provide a balance as we turn to our parents for unconditional love, acknowledging that there are others who have authority over us. God combines both, loving us and at the same time setting determined expectations. Page 243, as we chant together in the plural, Avinu Malkeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu ilanu melech ela ata, Avinu Malkeinu semanu lemush, Avinu Malkeinu Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu hachazirenu b'tshuva shlema lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu hachzirenu b'tshuva shlema lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu shalach refuah shlema lechol amecha.
Avinu Malkeinu shalach refuah shlema lechol amecha.
Avinu Malkeinu zochrenu b'zikron tov lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu zochrenu b'zikaron tov lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu v'sefer hachayim tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer chayim tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer geula v'yeshua.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer geula v'yeshua.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer parnasa v'chakala.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer parnasa v'chakala.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer zichuyot.
Avinu Malkeinu b'sefer zichuyot.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer selicha u'mechila.
Avinu Malkeinu kotbenu b'sefer slicha u'mechila.
Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu v'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu v'aleinu ki ein banu ma'asim aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu v'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu Chonenu v'aleinu ki ein banu ma'asim aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed ve'oshienu. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ולמדי ורק ירותי, והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל. בגלה בזמן קריב ימירו.
Amen. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ועולמי עלמיה.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה
בריחו.
בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה באמירו אמן. תקבל צלותינו ותחון לכל ישראל כל דם אבוהון וישמעיה ואמירו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמעיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמירו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמירו
Amen.
A synagogue president was standing before his congregation during the High Holy Days. Friends, the president began, unfortunately, I must report that a massive hole has been found in the roof of the synagogue. Now I have some good news and some bad news for you, the synagogue president continued. The good news is that we have the money to repair it. The bad news is that the money is in your pockets. L'shana Tova, and welcome to the Kol Nidre service of Congregation B'nai Israel. CBI, through our prayer leaders, Rabbi Spitz, Ba'alat Tefillah, Amy Robinson Katz, Carl Cedar, and Hal Hurwitz, have continued to provide virtual services to our community every week since the pandemic started. In addition, we have had online minyanim where our members have been able to recite Kaddish nearly every day of the week. Our learning online has exceeded what our in-person learning was prior to the pandemic. Rabbi Spitz has had his Sama Day and special event speakers on Zoom, and we have had other regular leaders of learning lead sessions on Zoom. We have shared Havdalah each Saturday night, hosted by a CBI family, and recently, each day of Elul, we have had a shofar blowing by a CBI congregant and some Torah teaching by Rabbi Spitz and others from our community. I have now had the privilege of being president of Congregation B'nai Israel for 20 months. Another 4 months from now, I will receive the honor of becoming the immediate past president with the role of advising our next president. I was happy to take on the position of president in order to manage what I feel is one of the most important Jewish organizations in Orange County. CBI is the center of conservative Judaism in our area and provides Jewish educational programs for both adults and children. CBI is a fantastic resource for anyone wanting to interact with other Jews and become involved with the Orange County Jewish community. It gives me great pleasure to actively participate in such a wonderful organization. Last year, we added an abundance of security improvements to our campus. Our CBI COVID-19 Advisory Task Force has developed guidelines to safely reopen once it is deemed prudent to do so. We hope to be able to have everyone back at CBI as soon as possible. While programs such as our religious school, summer camp, and youth programming have fees related to their programs, the fees do not cover all of the costs incurred. And that is why we are continuously fundraising and asking for donations. To continue thriving, the CBI community depends on each of us. Membership dues cover only a portion of our operating expenses. We rely on our Kol Nidre appeal to help us close the gap between dues and the true cost of giving you the synagogue life that you want and deserve. Our CBI Honor Circle donors took the first step at the beginning of the summer, but our success cannot rest in the hands of a few. This year's goal for a Kol Nidre appeal is 100% participation. Whatever amount you can pledge, large or small, you will be securing a personal stake in the future of our CBI community. Please help us reach 100% congregational participation this year. Our goal is only within reach when every family participates at whatever level is meaningful for them. Here at Congregation B'nai Israel, Kol Nidre pledges are not valued at their monetary amount, but rather at the value of your intent. I ask you to give with your heart and your love for CBI. This is the year to invest more in CBI. to allow us to continue to provide the needed programming to our members who are at home, keeping their distance from others while the COVID-19 virus continues to spread throughout the world. I want to thank my wife Elisa for her never-ending support of me performing the mitzvah as the president of our wonderful synagogue. I also want to thank Rabbi Spitz and our office staff and building staff for their tremendous support and guidance this year. In August, we welcomed our new executive director, Carol Serber, who has been added to our staff. Helene Coulter, as our operations manager, has been the strength of continuity in our transition. I greatly appreciate the hard work of our other staff for what they do throughout the year. Thank you also to everyone who volunteers for CBI, whether on the board, on a committee, reading Torah, or leading a service. It takes a village to run CBI. In conclusion, as we work through the challenges brought on by COVID-19, please help us make 5781 a year that is marked by continued strength, engagement, and community. Your participation will make the difference as we maintain all that we have done and improve for the coming year. Please make a Kol Nidre donation after Yontif by going to the CBI website at cbi18.org or by calling the CBI office. Let's stand together for CBI while we are staying apart. We can celebrate together the love and community of CBI by joining together to fill the gap between what our dues generate and the additional amount that we need to fund our wonderful programs at CBI. Please participate in our Kol Nidre appeal at whatever level is meaningful for you. And if you are able, this year, please give a little more than you normally give to our Kol Nidre appeal. Again, I thank you for your continued support of CBI. Lashana Tova and Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed in the book of life for a good year.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu komishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gom aleinu kechol hamonam,
v'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שכונות השמיים ויוסד הארץ ומושבי גרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינת עוזו בגובה מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס ומתו ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהושבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד. כן יקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו לרופא וביצוע וזך להפק אלוהים כל בני מסר ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Kaddish Yatom is our opportunity to honor our loved ones who have passed. If you are observing a yurtzeit or are in mourning, I invite you to join together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'yizman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ol me'ol maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha berichu, le'ela le'ela, mekol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'miran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Amen.
Psalm 27 is the psalm we have been reciting all through Elul. It continues until the 7th day of Sukkot. Achal she'alti me'ed ata avakesh. Only one thing do I ask of you, ever-present one. Shifti beveit Adonai, that I may dwell in the house of the ever-present one, kol yemei chayai.
Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Shivti beveit Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lachazot benoam Adonai, ulevaker behechalo. Lachazot benoam Adonai, ulevaker behechalo.
Achal she'alti me'et Adonai, only one thing I ask from God, and that is that we should have many more nights like this, in which we can gather as a community, hopefully next year in person. But tonight, let us hold the preciousness of tonight as Kol Nidre, a night that we have shared together, linking us to sacred words, to our yearning to be more whole as people. I want to thank Amy Robinson Katz for her indeed presence of spirit and voice to uplift us, Hal Hurwitz for joining, and there are more that shared tonight's prayers with you.
Yes, so thank you to those in our choir who recorded themselves remotely to be a part of the music for tonight, and special thanks to our soloists, Anasia Klang and Nathan Heldman, for singing tonight. And a very special thanks to you in the community. I believe there was 17-ish of you who recorded yourselves, sang the Shema and Ve'ahavta, so you could be a part of the service with us tonight. It means so much to see you on the screen and for us to get to chant together in this way. So thank you.
And I also want to thank Mark Golden for his words tonight. He's been a great president for me to partner with, and a board that he represents and leads that represent the best of who we are as a community. To all our leaders and to each of you, wishes of Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed for a good year.
Yigdal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach, nimtza ve'einet el metziuto, echad ve'en yachid ke'ichudo, ne'lam ve'gam ein sof le'achduto, ein lo demut haguf ve'eino guf, lo na'aroch elav kedushato, kadmo lechol davar asher nivra, rishon ve'en reshit le'reshito, hino adon olam bechol otzar, yoreg קם בישראל כמשה עוד, נביא ומביט את אמונתו, תורת אמת נתן לעם הוביל, על יד נביאו נאמן ביתו.
Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the Universe, in this evening we pause and we try to open our hearts to the presence of goodness in the world, to your enduring presence. May we know that we count before you, and we do so as a collective. All the faces that appear in our mind's eye are the faces of community with which we are identified. May we know that we are much more than just ourselves, and that we are each a part of you. May we know that we can be more, and may we so be. Amen.
מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו. מתים יחייל ברוב חסדו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו.